does a number of things that any one of which I think would have made it a good film. It sort of reflects in a very powerful way the socio-cultural and political situation of the day. It gets at the tedium and power of everyday life, and it's really about relationships. It's really about relationships, which became so clear. I mean, we will maybe have a chance to talk about each of those three, sort of the politics, the everyday, and the relationships. But I'm just so struck about so many of the relationships. I'm curious to know which of the relationships in that film interested you most. What struck me, I have to say, was the relationships amongst women this time, like Mira and her mother-in-law in that incredible dance scene.
I mean, anything at the end of the day has to be on relation in some way. So I always, I thought about these films like riffles of, like walls, you have like around the village, then you have the couple things. So each one is like in his own little place, how do you say, contemplating his relationship and whatever. But yes, indeed, I felt the woman, to begin with, I thought the women in my script were not as strong as a writer. I felt all the time. I have to be very grateful to Juna Suleiman, who was my partner, on the film. She casted the film. She also played the main role. And I think once she came in the film, we were walking her character together, and it's true that, and she brought her teacher from the school, which is like the mother, just brilliant, beautiful. She's a professor of education in Nazareth, not an actress at all. She told me, this. And once I saw the mother, she's like, I was desperately in love with the mother. She had this light in her eyes, and this was actually coming from the actress, because with Isabel, the mother, I saw she had this sting in her eyes, she had this light that was in spite of everything. And I thought to myself, I have to use it in the film somehow. And then the scene with her and her son came about, and then I thought about having Mira dance at one point, and then we were working on the dance itself, because what I like about this moment of dance is it's not only a moment of, trying to free the body or free, but then when she sees the mom, she turns it into a little, oriental dance. So in a way she's reclaiming, this movement, and then they connect through that. So it's like goes through the generation. It's not about I am young and rebellious and you're old. They were all rebels, this woman connection and this little rebellious that they share in the society. So yes, I'm happy if the woman, I agree, I like the woman.
Yeah, really powerful. So much of the film is about unfulfillment, the lack of being finished. The house is never finished. The marriages of the newlyweds is never consummated. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The gate to the wall takes forever to be finished. Nothing's ever finished.
Well, I think that's my fault. In a way, my first film, The Band's Visit, has a line there at the end of this night that the Egyptian orchestra and the people, I don't know if you've seen it, but they have this one long night, and in the end there is one character who never finishes his concerto, and the other character suddenly tells him, maybe this is how your concerto ends without big orchestra, without. So I guess this is something that goes with me.
Are you a procrastinator?
What?
Do you like delay before finishing things? I mean, I now see it perfectly. I mean, the scene of them waiting at the station forever and ever and ever. And
I don't think that's about the delaying thing. I think it's about the beauty of waiting in a way, because that's when magic happens, in those in-between moments where they don't have, you don't have any real purpose. You're out of time, and then you go into the transcendental, mood in a way. So I don't like this boxing it in delaying your walk. I mean,
right, you see,
it's actually about looking for those moments.
right, which you see in the everyday, in the boredom, what seems to be the boredom of the everyday. You see these moments, these sparks of inspiration, because that's what in those two films you're showing is sort of the constant delay and sort of the boredom and the frustration, and that you see as a kind of platform for.
I guess that's what I'm interested in. I don't really question myself. I mean, other people have like big stories about heroes and things that happen, and maybe they live like that. But I see this beauty in much quieter stuff. I honestly think that I've been here like 2 weeks now in LA. It's like it's noisy. You get hard. It's getting harder and harder to just stare and think about things, that's I think where all the big ideas in humanity came, from the moments in between when people were, I don't know. I think Foucault had this about these big ships where where all the ideas came from, because they took them so much time to get somewhere. So. Yes, the film is an invitation, I think, for this other look, for these waiting moments, for what happened in between the lines and in between people. And it's a feeling that I like in cinema generally. I mean, if you look at westerns, like spaghetti westerns, you have a guy riding into town, everybody is waiting, it's about waiting. That doesn't necessarily happen, and there's a gun in the end also here. So it's like a basic element of cinema is waiting for
and literature. And you had a good collaborator in this regard inside Kafka.
Yes.
Here's a kind of curious feature. So you had a Palestinian born in Israel who wrote a novel in Hebrew, using a very important biblical phrase, right?
Yes.
Chapter 1 of Genesis, which was made into a film by an Israeli Jewish director in Arabic. So what was that work of cross-cultural translation like?
Well, my biggest point that it happened, I mean, before you can say anything about what it means, it basically means that one day Said approached me and said, "Hey, I have this novel." That's a sort of welcoming. Even though I knew this was going to be very least questionable, was in this kind of mood and saying, "Okay, let's question it. I have an invitation. Let's see how am I fitting in that." And then started, dialogue started, and the dialogue developed, and people joined in, and Juna Suleiman came in, and I brought her boyfriend to play the main role. So it was actually coming together. It's not as if I didn't wake up one morning and said I want to do this kind of project. Actually, I probably would never have thought about it, But then something in life happened, and then then you start to have another responsibility, which is like, I think, for this offering of life, which maybe is strange, but on the other hand may lead to beautiful places.
So I'm wondering if you see this as an overtly political film, and how you do politics in your films. Because at one level, part of what you show is, well, part of what it seems like is that conditions in this village, this town, within the Green Line, are not that much different from conditions in the West Bank. I mean, you have sort of constraints of the wall. And, you know, are you saying that the Palestinian citizens of Israel also live under conditions of occupation of sorts? Is that part of the political charge of the film, or how do you relate to that?
So I'll split my answer in two. So first of all is about the film, you know. So anything in life is political and anything in life is personal, and the film is there and, you know, is open to interpretation, whatever, which, you know, they are not, and when I make a film, I don't think about what it's talking about politically. I cling to the characters, I cling to a certain feeling, and in this case that was the feeling of besieged, the essence, the feeling of how it is when the roads are closed, when your future is closed, when you don't see the horizon, when suddenly you're you know, in sort of a vertigo of your existence, you know. So first of all, that was the film about for me, and that's what I follow when I do it. Then afterwards there are political interpretation of the film. And if you ask me personally if I think that Palestinians in Israel that live in Israel suffer from inequality and instability and suppression, then my personal answer is, of course, you know, no doubt about it, no question about it. The question of, I think what the story brings, which basically comes from Syed's story, which he portrayed very also beautifully, was this, how do you say, this arc of classes, this endless thing with classes suppressing, each one suppressing the lower one. And that's a very brave choice out of his, and it's also where I think the film can have a also a mirror for the Israeli public, Jewish public, or whatever, because then again this thing with once being a minority, when minority is put under pressure, then some of his instinct is to close down another minority. That's what's going on throughout the line at the end of the day in Israel. So I think the film is, you know, questioning this, the story in itself, the story of why one day, you know, without any reason or without any apparent reason or without any control of your life, you know, suddenly you are closed. That's put to discussion all these circles of suppression. You know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and sort of there's a biblical expression that comes to mind in conveying that. Evet ki imloch, the slave or servant who comes to rule, sort of forgetting the experience.
Slave, I'll tell you, there's another nice, I was once, I don't know if this has anything to do with the film, but can we go to a little sideway now? It's just you were
no one's going to object.
What?
I think everyone's going to object.
No, you were asking about I think it's biblical or Mishnah, Evet ki imloch, right?
The book of Proverbs.
So like basically would you like to translate it?
Yeah, it can mean a servant who comes to rule, who comes to power, and in the implication being forgetting the experience of subjugation and oppression.
Yeah, and no, so it's probably out of the, because I heard another interpretation for this but I'll tell you about this later.
Okay. You know, conflict, it's not just suppression. There's so many levels of conflict here. It's so interesting. So most overt is that presented at the wall between Israeli Jews and Palestinians. But what's so interesting about the film is to see the layers of conflict within the village. the different constituencies. You have Nabil, and then you have sort of the thug who and his band, and then you have the grandfather and Sami and the familial tensions and conflict. So it reminds us that when we think of groups, we are in danger of misunderstanding if we assume they're a monolith. They're just one thing.
No,
You've shown so many layers in that.
They're not monolith, but I guess they do tend, because also on the other hand, if you take the history of, let's say, this kind of stories, okay, stories of certain society being suddenly closed or suddenly evacuated or suddenly, you would still get to know certain features of behavior, I think. Not which are like always. You have the collaborator, you have the one who's just wait, you have the one who wants to go against, you have those types which is universal. You will find them in any stories, Jewish stories, whatever. You will find, those archetypes. So I can say there is some sort of archetypal, behavior that we can, discuss, but we cannot say, that's the way the society works. No, the society is like this dialect between those kind of forces within it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just a program, I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then we're going to open up for your questions and thoughts. So my second to last question is about Sami, who is in some sense, reminds me of Said Kashua's own life journey, someone seeking to pass into Israeli Jewish society. Successful in many in many ways, chronicles it, and ultimately fails or refuses to. I'm wondering how you see Sami's effort at passing.
I think Said Kashua has like a different palette of this character. I mean, so if you watch his like more popular work, like TV, he was playing with this more of funny character which just want to assimilate,
I'm
yeah, and so that was a more funny character. I think the tone of the film is a bit different in the sense that Sami is not someone who doesn't understand the suppression. He understands the suppression. He's been extinguished in a way. He learned to live with it, to somehow walk between the drops. And this event is pushing him back to at least to try to take an action or being so. So I think it's more in the close to the character in the book that he wrote, because in the book he's a journalist and he's more aware of the situation, and he knows that. And I think you can feel also about Sami, even though he believes that okay, maybe they need me around, but you can see he's someone who's not a caricature of just wanting to be assimilated. He's just really trying desperately to somehow get through.
So my last question is really a comment, which is an invitation for you to comment. Really throughout the film, from beginning to end, I thought of a short fragment written by the great modern author and Czech Jew, Franz Kafka. The fragment is called Before the Law. And it's about someone who comes from the country and seeks entry at a gate. And there's a gatekeeper there. And I'm going to read just a short segment of it.
I'm always happy to read this story, to hear this story again. It's like a complete, greatest masterpiece in like...
Yeah, a very, very short one-page fragment. So before the law sits a gatekeeper. To this gatekeeper comes a man from the country who asks to gain entry into the law. But the gatekeeper says that he cannot grant him entry at the moment. The man thinks about it and then asks if he will be allowed to come in later on. It is possible, says the gatekeeper, but not now. And the man from the country tries again and again and again, is always given this kind of vague
Come
back later, and ultimately dies of old age. And I have to say,
No, you have to read the end. Come
I
on.
don't have the end. I don't have the end. Well, something like
No, the ending is that, he's almost, years passes and he's very old and is about to die, and then you see the gatekeeper closes the gate. So he tells him, I've been waiting here all those years, and I didn't see anyone going in this gate, and the guard says, yes, well, this gate was only for you. Now we are closing it. that's the...
He tries to gather himself up, ask, can I get in, and then expires. Well, your film really reminded me of...
No, thank you. I'm really thrilled, and of course, this was an inspiration, the Gate of Kafka.
Yes,
Yeah,
a direct inspiration in this.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's the difference from side book. At the end, you understand that it was a part of transfer of territories between Israel and Palestinian territory, and this village somehow was transferred. That was in the book. I actually shot this ending, but when I came to the part we were watching, and everybody was standing there in front of this total emptiness, and like, what was this about? And what is this gate for? What is this wall for? I obviously thought about, the Gate of Kafka, and it was like, I felt that was for me like the highest, thought of the film, that I don't need now to explain it in terms of politics, but it's already explained in terms of humanity in general.
Yeah, I mean, the story always reads to me as a tale about the futility and incomprehensibility of
finishing everything, of
modernity,
forgetting some ever. Like you said before about all those things that are almost.
Right. Okay, let's turn to the audience. And yes, back there.
Hi. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about visual language. So many shots and compositions created humor or tension just from how you arranged them, and I was wondering how you approached that to the EP, or if there are any influences that you had in mind.
Yes, about the visual language. So, also about the humor in visual language, you asked. So first of all, the visual language, I thought that this movie should be like darkness closing in. I mean, it should start with a lot of lights, a lot of parties, and that's bit by bit we'll have darkness creeping in. And when darkness creeps in, the light will be more directed on the people because it will be candlelights or spotlights. So their faces will suddenly appear much more. That in the beginning you are not, really still understanding who's, and then slowly by slowly you get to see their faces, and everyone has this is like hoping for something. And then I thought that was the middle part of the film, and the ending would be like this blue light, only like that it already look like as if there's no light at all. So then morning, because the film is called Let It Be Morning from the biblical verses you said about, the first morning. So I have morning like hitting you in the face and about humor from, I think it's about interferences, obstacles, and estrangement in the frame. So, I mean, at the end of this is what kind of goes, and waiting. So, it's like you have scenes and people are waiting, and then you have some sort of interference, somebody is very loud, and of course, that's kind of all once you get them, when you're waiting for this to happen, then you are like, you just drop something in the middle and everybody, it's like, so there is interferences in the frame, we use those doves to create this, the most serious scene, the most loving, also those doves all the time. So everything is put in this gentle irony also all the time. You can be touched, but it's also gives you this feeling of, as you said, that it will never happen.
Even the dogs.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, please, Tom.
Yes, I look at this as somewhat a parochial point of view. I've been writing about, as a reporter, about Israeli films and so on, and every year I come back to the thing, when will Israel finally win an Oscar? And again and again, I notice that the highly self-critical Israelis almost invariably put the a negative foot forward. I remember there was the main theme was Israelis in importing Russian whores to Israel, and a number of them. And when I once sort of brought this up to one of the directors, he said, "We don't really give a damn about the Academy Award. We do it because we are artists and we have to express." I mean, I would have thought that the ideal film, if anybody worries about an Oscar, would be The Band's Visit, which I thought was a superb film. And it, with a light touch, both negative, but both parties, both sides were equally human. So I come with this, unpleasant feeling, and then the answer is always, I don't really care about the Academy. I'm doing it what I need to say. So Israel has 10 times it's been nominated among the last 5 for the award. Does this play any role at all when you create something, or is it you have to say what you have to say, and the Academy Award stuff like this is something else?
Well, I have basically this naive feeling that what touches my heart may touch Academy members' feeling. And it's not as if I'm doing a film not to be in the Academy or to be in the Academy. I'm actually doing films where I love the characters, where I love the story, where I think the story has truth in it, has love in it. So, and why shouldn't it be loved by Academy members?
Yes, please.
So I was wondering if the ending is an observation on the inevitability of violence to affect change, or whether it's a statement.
Louder.
I will repeat the question.
Or if it's a statement on violence being needed to affect change.
So the question was about whether the last scene was a statement about the inevitability of violence or the necessity of violence as a liberatory act.
I didn't think about the ending in those terms, even though I find the question very, very interesting, because the movie does ask the question of violence. Are we coming together? Are we marching in, or are we waiting? Which are but about the ending itself, at the end of the day, they miss the moment. In a way, there is, and I'll tell you in a minute where I took this ending from, but or where it came from to in my mind. Do I think violence is inevitable? Well, if I'm a realist, yes. If you ask me as a dreamer, as someone who's still for some reason making films and show them and speak about them, then I hope not. But this small history that I saw made me believe that human beings tends toward solving problems with minds. no, I don't see any real evidence of that's happening. So if you ask about the inevitability, yes, if I had to bet, probably it's inevitable. If it's required, it's the other side of inevitable, no? Once it's inevitable, it's also required in a way. So that's like being observing from the side. But you know, all that said, still I made the film, which means I would like to connect. I would like to say, hold on, it doesn't have to be this way. It is inevitable in the sense that as long as you have this, and this has to be connected with class struggle. It's inevitable that once you have a stronger ruling class with more money to, you know, whatever that is, that's where violence is inevitable. I mean, that's for me the basic thing. When you have such differentiation in class and economy and income and participation in media, whatever, when you have such differences, yes, violence is inevitable. I don't see any other way because it's continuous oppression. So, but I do, you know, if someone would, you know, stand up and speak about an equal state that doesn't and that doesn't discriminate by law, and you would work on an more equal distribution of wealth, more equal distribution of sources, then you know you can, and it can happen. But I don't know if anyone's working on it really. I mean, people are working on it, but probably not. That was long. I'm sorry, but it's a deep question, so I don't have.
I think we have time for one more question. So yes, please.
Hi. I love the film, by the way. It was beautiful. And I got to see Palestine, which I never get to see on media. So I love it. It was shot there, I assume, right?
It's what?
It was shot in Palestine?
It was shot within the Israeli borders.
Within
It's
the Israel-
48 Arabs. It's a Palestinian village within the territory of Israel.
Perfect. I never get to see this in our
Yeah.
media somehow. And then I wanted to ask you if you had shot it during the pandemic.
No, about the pandemic. No, we shot it before the pandemic. And for example, there was this one scene about sanitizer gel,
Right,
which was
right.
in the script, which was just
Funny.
you know, it's again, you know, like archetypal things that people do once they are closed.
Right.
Try to purify themselves. Try to find the one who's to blame the disease upon, and trying to purify themselves. It's like as old as Greek tragedy. You know?
Right.
So we shot it in the film, and then the scene was all the time jumping in and out of the film because it was not like a super necessary scene. But then COVID came.
Yeah, and
it
it's
was-
very appropriate.
Yeah.
And that line about escape, getting away from the eternal stench.
Yeah, the eternal stench, the eternal film.
And I also wanted to tell you, I was at the Cannes Film Festival, and the only film that I went to see was your film. So, out of all the films, that was like my favorite. I'm only kidding, not the only, but my favorite.
Well, thank you so much.
Well,
Great job on that too, in the band's piece.
Yeah.
I think many of us could probably sit here for a long time just analyzing many of the incredible scenes in this film. But as I understand it, these kinds of conversations are supposed to be brief. So,
There's someone there.
oh, is there another question?
The end of the movie, was there something that inspired the ending?
Was there anything that inspired the ending? That was the question?
Yeah.
Actually, the ending came. Now, I don't want to get myself into trouble saying this specific story, so don't take it as one of those cheap. The story that my grandmother always told me about the ending of the war was she said that was the thing. We were all in like the death march in Auschwitz, and after Auschwitz, somewhere in the snow, somewhere, everyone's sick, and she described that one day they woke up inside this little camp where they were marching, and there was no one there. It sounded differently. We started crawling out of our, trenches or whatever they had there, and there was no one there. And there were people that were afraid to go out, to go in. What will be now, So, and this picture of people after closure, kind of, just one day it disappears, and they are stuck with this question of what was this about, but this facing reality that was so strong. So I always thought, I'm going to try to give this feeling of this morning, calm, people are walking, going, and then suddenly you are in front of the gate.
Yeah. Yes. We have another question.
Congratulations, it's a great film. So, as a director, I want to ask you, when you make this film, how you get feedback from Israeli side and Palestinian side?
So how is the feedback from when I made the film from Palestinian side and Israeli side? First of all, we made this film together. My cast was Palestinian, and they were involved all the way. And so, and Alex, who's a film editor, he edited some scenes in the film when we were working. So rough cuts, and I have my crew also from the Jewish side. At the end of the day, we were trying to do a good film. And the general question, like how it is accepted in Israel or how it is accepted in Palestine, at the end of the day, it's the same question as how it is accepted in the US, like he was said before, some people will say, I didn't like it, some people will like it, it doesn't necessarily say that there is a certain opinion of a certain social class, it's not really like that in life. So I get all kinds of reaction, and mostly I get good reactions because the people who don't like it, they don't come to me
Okay. Well, it has been a real pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure.